Welcome to the English 403A British and World Literature Weekly Starter for April 20th, 2015. Well, it's time to start writing your research paper. If you look at the calendar, you can see that, I went ahead here. Let's go back. You can see that today you're going to have today and tomorrow to formally start writing. You'll continue to write. Make sure you go through the lessons in the course to get the help that you need. Also, Tuesday at 11 a.m., I'll be having a special session that you can come and get help on your research paper. You will be having it due the next week, so this is the time to write. All right, so the rest of the session, I'm going to talk about how you get that A on the research paper. First of all, it needs to, again, be a literary research paper, but you should have passed off your topic and your outline, so then you'll know for sure you're already on the track that you need to be. Now, when you're writing, a research paper is formal. So, number one, do not use rhetorical questions. So you're not going to start with, have you ever thought about Beowulf? Okay, that's a rhetorical question. Don't use questions at all in your paper. It's all going to be statements that you use. Keep the paper in third-person point of view. Do not use I, you, we, me, my, us, our, your. Okay? Keep it in third-person point of view. Be specific. Do not use the word it or stuff or a lot or very. Just be specific. Don't use there are, this is. Use action and active verbs. Don't use passive voice. So use verbs that are in present tense as much as possible and that are active. Don't use that casual language and keep the paper formal. All right, so where to start? You're going to start with your introduction. You should have a hook, a bold, as I cross out question or bold statement. It could be a quote or a bold statement. Do not use a rhetorical question like, have you ever? You could do something like, people have wondered whether Shakespeare wrote all that he wrote, or there is a huge debate going on if Shakespeare was who he said he was. Something like that. Keep your paper in third person. Be specific, as we've talked about, and don't use casual language. After the hook, make sure you provide some background information. Give us, the audience, some understanding of your topic. Then you're going to close your introduction with your thesis, which is the topic with an assertion about the topic. If you are doing the Shakespeare topic, then you're going to assert whether or not he was the author. If you're doing a Beowulf paper, perhaps it's something about Anglo-Saxon beliefs, particularly those of blank, affected and influenced Beowulf significantly. Then you need to have a transition statement. You can have it at the end of your introduction. If that doesn't work for you, you can also have it at the beginning of your next paragraph. But you need to be working. This is something where I see a lot of students struggle, is transitions in their paper. Having things connect to one another, have it flow smoothly. All right, so as you turn in your paper, it should look like this. You don't need to have a title page. Just have your name and my name, Mrs. Elliott, English 403A, and then the date, your title, and then you should be having your paper numbered. You'll start, the paper should be double spaced. You'll start with an indent. Make sure all paragraphs are indented. All right, here's a sample introduction. Let's look at the different pieces. Many American films and novels follow the coming-of-age genre in which the main character begins in a state of confused turmoil and endures a series of obstacles which they learn to overcome on their way to maturity. J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye is an unconventional coming-of-age novel, differing from the average plot pattern in that the main character, famous literary protagonist Holden Caulfield, endures turmoil which never ceases, although he matures. Strangely, he suffers a mental breakdown at the close of the novel rather than the expected triumph. However, with Holden's mental collapse comes understanding and clarity about growing up, which brings about his own maturation. So you have the thesis, have background, and the hook. Notice also that we have transitions, things like however, and right here we have these connected. Coming of age genre, coming of age novel. They're connected together. Okay, so once you have your introduction, your next step is to write the body paragraphs. And I'm not going to tell you how many you should have because it's going to depend on you as a writer and also your topic. So make sure, though, that remember every new idea is a new paragraph. So for each body paragraph, make sure you have facts, evidence, and quotes, as well as explanation about those quotes and why they're important to your overall assertion in your thesis. You should have in-text citations. That's a must. Even if you only paraphrase and decide not to have everything used as a quote, you still need to have in-text citations. And we'll talk about that in a second. I'll show you how to do it right here. All right, so for instance, you want your in-text citations and your quotes to flow with your own language. Notice this. In addition to gaining information from overseas, farmers also began planning and conducting experiments, and although they lacked a truly scientific approach, these farmers engaged in experiments to obtain results and learn from the results. Now, you don't need to do numbers because we're doing MLA. This is a paraphrase you would do right here. A citation. Then the author continues with their own words. Agricultural organizations were then formed to encourage experimentation. Notice that this flows right along with the text. The only reason you know it's a quote is because of the quotation marks. That is the perfect way to use quotes. You want it to flow with your ideas instead of saying, for example, in this quote. All right, so to cite it, you're going to use the author's last name and the page number. If you don't have the author, you don't know the author, you can use the first main word of the title. Don't use the, but you use the first main word of the title. More information can be found at the OWL website that is found in the announcements. All right, so we talked about how to get an A, you need transitions. So let's look at some transition words and how this person uses transitions. Here we have, in addition to gaining information from overseas, agricultural organizations were then formed, thus new knowledge was transmitted. Notice things like thus, therefore. We also have then formed, which links ideas together. Something that's a tip from me, don't always have your transitions at the beginning as here. Have things like agricultural organizations were then formed, or agricultural, organizations like this were formed too. And so things that connect, words that connect rather than just having all the traditional transition words. If you're stuck from transition words, you can always in Google type transitions and you'll be able to get documents that give you transitional words to use that you can get your brain going with. All right, some other ideas. You don't have to use the entire quote. If you cut out pieces of the quote to fit, you use what's called an ellipsis. That's those 3 periods. Make sure you have citations throughout your paper. Now, let's say you want to use a long quote that's more than 3 or 4 lines. You're going to use what's called the block quote. It's going to be tabbed on both sides, a double indent on both sides, and then the citation, and you can use that there. All right, then you get, after your body paragraphs are finished, you'll get to your conclusion. You should have a transition as you have throughout your paper. Review the main points of the paper, restate your thesis but in different words, but assert the same thing, and then you can conclude. You can answer that research question or answer the hook. So that's the basics of how to do this research paper. If you get stuck, have any questions or concerns, please contact me. At this time, you should go take the quiz for the weekly starter. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.